South Dakota Public Broadcasting had a presentation at the Rotary today to discuss their future financially, and they say it is not looking promising. The South Dakota legislature was able to stop a bill that would cut funding to SDPB earlier this year, but with the battle at the federal level with the Trump administration and PBS, that national funding could be cut in half, and that can result in a cascade of cuts at the state level that could include broadcasting of the legislative sessions and high school sports.
A lot of other states don't provide public safety. They're not providing statewide public safety. They're not providing statewide open government, and they're not involved in high school athletics or fine arts at all. They're just passing through national programming. What makes South Dakota so special is the variety of services we provide that are unique to the people that live here.
SDPB board members met with Congressman Dusty Johnson after the Rotary meeting to try and sway him in siding against Trump's budget cuts against public broadcasting.